Welcome back, Flyers nitty-gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv, Wolok, my partner in crime, Vasili Gianarakos. Vasili, what's going on, buddy?
Not too much. It's really cold here in Canada, so I'm kind of trying to stay away from that as much as I can. It's kind of crazy too, just because the Flyers played on Saturday, but it's felt almost like, way longer than that. It's only been like 5-6 days. And I'd say it's kind of a good thing because they have not been playing very well of late. So I don't know if all of us are looking forward to their games as much as we were at the beginning of the season.
I was going to say time drags when you're not having fun. Yeah. So, and our guest for the evening, returning guest, friend of the show, somebody obviously I'm always excited to have on. You know him from The Draft Analyst. If you guys are not aware of it, please Google it and go to the site. Steve Kournianos. Steve, welcome back, man.
Vasili, Yariv, what's going on? Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it as always.
For sure, man. Happy to have you on. And this seemed like a really appropriate episode considering where the Flyers are trending. I was like, we talked about this because of World Juniors, and we're like, oh, let's talk about that. And then that gets disrupted, and we'll talk about that too. But then the whole Flyer season has just gone down the shitter. At least it feels that way at this point. So why not start talking about the draft and picks and give people something to get excited about, because the Flyers will probably have a high pick this year, at least relatively high. So, yeah. Let's get the news out of the way. Actually, let me say the sponsor thing because I always forget. Jim Steaks on South. Check out Jim Steaks on 3rd and South. Make sure you get a cheesesteak. They're really good. Go get a cheesesteak. All right, so let's get into the news. We'll go pretty high level on this, and then we'll get right into draft stuff because I don't want to dig too much into this because there's not too much to say about it. So recent news is TK, Braun, and Provorov are officially back. They are off COVID protocol. That also includes Claude Giroux. So, Steve, I don't know if you were aware of this too, but the Flyers were missing up to 9, 3 of which were injured. Couturier is still out. 9 NHL players. So they're playing with essentially a skeleton lineup and just getting shellacked in the process, which was just a pleasure.
There's a lot of that going around. It's a shame, but
yes. Yeah. Flyers didn't handle it well though either, which is a reflection of where the team is. Wade Allison is expected to play for the Phantoms. Vasili, you pulled that one up to me earlier. So that is great news. Allison was out pretty much all year, came back for a short stint, was playing well, got injured again, was out for several weeks. Now he's back. Let's pray he stays healthy. Rasmus Ristolainen goes on COVID protocol, and the Flyers now found themselves down another defenseman, but that does leave opportunity for others. And I do want to bring this comment up. This is the second time that a Flyers player has complained. Ivan Provorov publicly complains about COVID protocol, saying that the league has to figure something out, calling it ridiculous. We had Carter Hart do that the other day. I don't know if it's so much on the NHL just because they have to deal with 2 different countries' regulations. So I think they're kind of in a stuck position. But Steve, I'll put that one to you first, and then Vasili. What do you think about the COVID protocols with how they're handling it? I mean, you don't need to get political, but do you think that they're doing the best they can, or what do you see?
Personally, I was happy when Adam Silver with the NBA said that we have to move on at some point, and not move on like we ignore it. We have to learn how to live with it.
Yeah.
And I always use the Japanese after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, how they had 2 atomic bombs dropped on them, and there was radiation everywhere, but they really had no choice for the sake of society, for the sake of their culture and civilization. They had to continue. And a lot of people were casualties because of that, working in the radiation. And so, again, this is one of several historical examples I could use, but I like the fact that someone who leads a pro sports organization came out and said that we need to find a way to live with this. And so I guess glass half full, we're seeing that they've reduced the quarantine period from 10 to 5 days. So that's a start. And I think that we're going to see that along the way, is it's going to be little bits and pieces are going to start bringing things back to normal. It's not going to be cold turkey. Don't wear a mask. Don't go. I mean, I think they tried that a little bit this summer, and we saw how that ended up turning out because you can't predict the variants and so forth. So, but I get the players' frustration because I think we all know people who have tested positive for COVID and didn't have any symptoms, completely asymptomatic. And they just tested positive. And then you hear reports about, well, maybe the tests aren't that accurate. And, so I definitely understand their frustration. I guess it's a good thing that they're that competitive where they want to play. Remember, these guys have been sitting around. They've been playing, this tug of war. They've been kind of like with the pawns in this game of chess since, March of 2020. I mean, we had teams that went 9 months without playing or practicing. So I get their frustration. I personally think that they should probably take a page from their NBA brethren and say, you know what, let's maybe experiment a little bit. But at the same time, it's like you mentioned, the Canadian thing. Canada's got different laws. They got different regulations. They're taking this way more seriously than we are here down in the States. So it's a waiting game. It sucks. It's having a profound impact on the standings, on fantasy hockey, on gambling. It's crazy, but crazy is the norm now. So, we just have to keep taking it. Same thing with the players.
Yep. Honestly, very well said. And I honestly stand by pretty much everything you said there. And honestly, I expect more players to speak up over time. And I do think it needs to be forced to eventually find some kind of happy medium. There's a risk involved in it, but if players want to take that risk, they should be able to some degree. But again, I'm no expert. And like you said, Canada and US going to be complicated. Silly, what do you think?
Yeah, we're obviously all not experts in terms of the science of everything. So that's the hard part, but I agree with your sentiments. I do believe that if a player
we lose him. Canadian government shut him down.
That's funny.
Yeah. No more comments for Vasili. He'll probably cut.
Is he frozen? I think he's frozen.
Yeah, he is frozen.
Okay. Refresh.
Really the tough part.
There he is. You cut out, Vasili.
Did I cut out? Okay.
Yeah.
Forrest Gump's speech.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, okay. I'll go back to what I was saying, but basically, I just kind of agree with all your sentiments that you made, Yariv and Steve, and just with the Canada thing being in Canada and how serious that we're taking it over here, that's going to be the main struggle for the NHL. I really like the way the NFL kind of went through with things, leaving, if you're asymptomatic, we're not really going to be testing you. And then from that point, you kind of mitigate the problems that way. It's just with Canada, I don't think that we're ready here to kind of go that route. The States definitely seems like you guys are on that wavelength, but even I think Elliot Friedman tweeted out earlier when all this kind of was happening that, Canada is almost 6 months away from being able to have that conversation. So that's kind of what's limiting the league, I think, from going that route and kind of following the steps of the NFL and then kind of doing the minimum like the NBA did, going from the 10-day quarantine to the 5-day. And then just for our listeners too, just to context kind of what Provorov said, I have his quote here that I can read out.
Sure.
And he said, it's tough. You're willing to play through anything, any injury, any illness. And then here you get maybe a regular flu, not even. And then somebody tells you can't come back when you feel fine. Especially when you're trying to go out there and help your team win and take pride in that. If it's a broken bone or a broken leg or something like that, at least you can say, okay, I can play through that and I can live with that. But if that's just the flu that has a 99% survival rate, then everyone should play, because when other teams play against us with the stomach flu, for some reason, they're not canceling games. So why are they not letting us play or canceling games now? I don't really know. Something has to change, and hopefully it's going to change soon. I think that sentiment that Provorov's saying, I mean, he's not going to come out and say something like that unless the whole locker room kind of has the same mindset. And then you can tell there's a level of frustration as well with him. Just because, I mean, he played, 403 games straight and probably played through a ton of bumps and bruises along the way. Mm-hmm. And then is asymptomatic for COVID and gets pulled. So
I will say this. I believe his mother is a doctor as well.
I didn't know that. Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if they're talking about it like with family. And
yeah.
But again, I think the NHL might even agree with him behind closed door to some degree. But again, it's like, I think
with the public relations thing.
It's just more complicated. Yeah. But I will say this, and what we can end on this, because I don't want to spend the whole time talking about COVID because it's boring. But, I do think that the trend is going in the right direction. And I do expect that next season will probably be the closest thing to normal we experience, because I think the adjustments will just be there and it'll be like, okay, this is not possible.
And at that point too, I think, Canada will have kind of adjusted, because they seem like we lag about 5 to 6 months behind where the States are kind of at in terms of like their mindset on COVID. So by next season, you're probably right. Things will be a lot more close to normal.
Word. All right, let's get into the fun stuff. This is why we have Steve on, and I'm excited to talk about this because, quite frankly, the Flyer season has not been great, and I'm not like tear it down, rebuild the team. The Flyers still have their picks. They're going to be sellers at the trade deadline if things continue to go this way. So they're going to be looking to bring players in here. So Steve, at this point, we obviously reached out to you because we were hoping we could talk about World Juniors. That was cut short. Feel free to speak on that if you like, prior to the draft. But let's get into the draft. Like, what do you see as like the strengths? I don't know if the Flyers are going to be picking in the top 5. That might be a bit of a stretch unless they win the win the lottery draft. But from what I understand, this is a pretty deep draft, and typically when the ceiling is very high, I do find that it kind of falls underneath that as well, that there tends to be a lot more good players in the draft. What's your feeling on the draft this year?
Well, it's fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. And the reason why I think it's going to be fun is because, number one, it's going to be a live event again. And I'm not going to go, even though I usually go every year, but I get so much more work done in the office and when I have like my command center. So I'm going to, be able to, but still the fact that they're actually having a live event. But the important thing to think about first with this draft is that the draft lottery changes, right? So they made changes to the system. We saw one rule go into effect last year, and then the new one this year is going to be the teams the grandfathered in, right? So like you can't win it 3 years in a row. We're not going to have to worry about that this year, but it's the beginning of that. And also remember, like the last place team or whoever wins the lottery or finishes with the worst record in the regular season can't draft any lower than second. So it basically limits the chances of a team like the Flyers or someone to win the first overall pick, because you only have so many spots to move on. There's only 2 lottery drawings instead of the 3 that they used to do. Last year's draft, I didn't like all that much. And I considered it kind of weak, on par with 2017 for various reasons. I felt, anytime you have a draft that's heavy on defensemen and thin on centers, natural centers, you got to classify. It's just like football with quarterbacks. Same thing. If you don't have a strong quarterback class, you're not going to deem it a strong draft. But this draft actually has a whole bunch. In fact, the first 4 guys. The first 4 or 5 guys from the Central Scouting rankings that came out today in the North American Skated Division and the European Skated Division, I think all of them are either play center or natural centers, or they've played center at some point during the season. So, which means that the NHL teams will eventually groom them that way if they want. They usually do. So, not a strong OHL crop. Although first overall pick, they say is going to be Shane Wright. I agree with that. He deserves it. Numbers aren't that great in terms of how a first overall prospect should produce. But he's still a really good player. He had a couple of dominant showings at tournaments in the past. So you do have that centerpiece. But now we're starting to talk about, okay, is he the lock to go first overall? I know everyone's ranking him that way, but is he a lock? And I don't think so. So I guess one prediction to get out of the way is he going to be a generational type player, right? He was what do they call exception? He was granted exceptional status for the OHL. Usually that's for the guys like, McDavid and Tavares and so on. Well, with Wright, I don't really know. To me, he's kind of like a Steven Stamkos type, best case scenario, where he's not like this explosive, mind-numbing speedster like a McDavid, but he is going to be he's got one of the best shots I think I've ever seen a draft prospect have. So that's going to be big, and
intriguing for teams.
Yeah, power play. I mean, it's what he does. He's just got a lethal one-timer. And he's also like a really good kid. He's a great leader. He's got all the intangibles. He's smart, high IQ. But there's a whole bunch of guys in that discussion, right? Joachim Kamel, Danila Yurov, the kid Savoy, and Geeky, the two kids from Winnipeg in the WHL. There's one other thing that needs to be discussed, and what helps make a draft really strong is the U.S. national program, national development program. And when they have an off year in terms of draft prospects, it doesn't really help the draft. We saw in 2019, pound for pound, we said that was going to be the deepest draft in the NHL since 2015, the one that had McDavid and Eichel. And part of that was because that NTDP had Zegras and Hughes and Cam York and Caulfield and Boldy and Spencer Knight. And what a surprise. Within 2 years, they're all in the NHL and they're all making waves. So last year's NTDP didn't really have that, but this year's group is fantastic. I mean, they're a lot of fun to watch. And I would say there may be a 1A to that 2019 group, being really the best draft class in the history of the game when you have 9 kids from one program going in the first round. So there's a lot to like, a lot of players, a lot of right defensemen, which is, what teams usually look for. But I think it's going to be a very forward-heavy first round. Maybe 2 defensemen will crack that top 10. You see a lot of different rankings. People have difference of opinions. But for the most part, I think that everybody's top 10, a lot of those kids won't go lower than, let's say, 15 or 20. Really?
So who from the USNTDP? Because I'm always super intrigued by that. And I rant about those players all the time. And I completely agree with you. And obviously we see the impact that Joel Farabee is having on the Flyers. I mean, he's having outside of the team struggling, he is not. He came into the NHL a professional. Cam York, I've been stating that he was NHL ready from last year. The Flyers were holding him back. He came in. His numbers weren't amazing in the AHL, but he definitely, he came in and, we can talk about him a little bit later. But he was playing 24 minutes against the San Jose Sharks the other night. He's being used like a number 1 defenseman. Yeah. And I'm not surprised by that. But so who in the USNTDP intrigues you the most? Are any of those guys you think going to be around maybe that 10 to 15 range where the Flyers potentially would, be interested?
Well, let's remember that they took Joel Farabee from the program as well. So they went back-to-back years, right? In 2018, they went Farabee. 19, they went Cam York. So I don't know how much turnover there's been in the scouting staff in between the Hextall regime and the Fletcher regime.
None, just the head of scouting.
Yeah. So the guys that if they have that type of success, whoever was banging on the table for Farabee and for York back in 2018, 19 respectively, then they're going to have a lot of street cred in that room when it comes time to decide on who to pick. So to answer your question, there's like 8 or 9 guys from this program that might crack the top 10, which is bananas to think. Yeah. Because when that happened in 2019, we're like, this will never happen for another 25, 30 years. But it's that good. And I'm only releasing a top 10 up to this point. I'm doing things a little bit different this year, but I already got 2 in my top 10. I got 4 in my top 15. And I'm probably going to have 9 or 10 in my top 32. Wow. And so it starts with Logan Cooley. Now, Cooley is a center. He's a Pennsylvania kid, but from the Pittsburgh area, huge Penguins fan. So we won't hold that against him. But he is fantastic. He's fast. If you watch the U18 program last year, usually they promote these kids every now and again. The U18 team last year had a whole bunch of injuries. And of course, we had COVID stuff and everything. They promoted Cooley along with a whole bunch of others. And so it seems like that experience that they got playing on the higher level really helped them this season. And they're slicing through everybody. They're beating college programs, big time college programs. They destroyed the competition at the U18 Five Nations in November. They outscored everybody, I think 32-6, something crazy like that. So with Cooley, he's a center, natural center, but he could also play wing. Then you have the other kid I like, Frank Nazar III. And you have to say Nazar III. You gotta respect the family name. And he is almost like Cooley and Nazar III are almost like a mini Hughes and Zegras, and they're that good. And I'm not overstating this at all. But from there, you have a whole bunch of other forwards. You have Cutter Gauthier, a big 6'1", 200-pound center/wing. He played a lot of wing this season, but they recently switched him to center, and he's been dominant. And then on top of that, then after him, you have Isaac Howard. You have the Snuggerud kid. Devin Kaplan. So all these kids are outstanding, dual threat. They got size, they got speed, they got shiftiness. But after that, you got the 3 defensemen: Seamus Casey, a Boston area kid; Ryan Chesley, a Minnesota kid; and then Layton Hudson, a kid who he's on the smaller side, but he's the one that got all the scouts out of their seats at the U18 Worlds last year. So right there, I think I named like 8 guys.
Yep.
But there's a couple more. Rutger McGrorty is another kid that a lot of people see as a top 10 to 15 pick. So, you put a gun to my head and I'm the Flyers at 10. I'm going to say, let's say 10 to 12. I'm going to assume that Cooley's going to be gone. He might even go top 3. But I think that Nazar the third, Isaac Howard, I was very bullish on Cutter Gauthier. I ranked him 6th, and a lot of people were kind of like raising their eyebrow at me, like, what are you doing? He's like ranked 54th in most consensus rankings. And then Central Scouting drops their ranks today, and where do they have him at? Like 7th in North America. No, they have him at 6th in North America. Yeah. So the cat's out of the bag now. Now, usually people, when they make their rankings, they like to adjust it off Central Scouting. I don't do that, but some people do. So if those guys are gone, you're looking at a really good group. Now, the question is, which direction do the Flyers go? Remember, they traded away their first-round pick last year. They took a high-scoring wing in Tuamalo with their first pick in round 2. They took a scoring wing in Forster in 2020. They took a defenseman in York in 19, and they took another wing, a scoring wing in 2018, 2 scoring forwards in Patrick and Frost in 17. So I know Flyers fans are a little frustrated with the development of some of the defensemen outside of Cam York, but there will be a couple of defensemen in that range. The kid Jiricek, the Czech kid, big, mean, physical guy. But then you have if there's a guy who's like a righty Cam York in this draft, I'd say it's Simon Nemec from the Slovakia. I just dropped his profile today in the blogs. Fantastic prospect. So they're going to get a good player out. But the thing is, we've been talking about this for so long. I feel like I'm, kind of steering Flyers fans into the wrong direction by saying, oh, the prospect pool is fine. The prospects are good, but it is a very deep draft.
Well, I do want to talk. And Vasili, if you have a question, I'll let you ask in a second here. I do want to dig into like development of players. We'll talk about that at the end. But, to answer your question, my opinion, I think Vasili would probably agree with me. I think the Flyers need a center. They need a center that's not necessarily like a two-way guy. They need like a dynamic playmaking center, probably a step above Morgan Frost, somebody who will probably come into you mentioned Cooley, like that is probably exactly what they need. I can even see the opportunity there for the Flyers to even try to move up in the draft to try to get somebody like him. Because that's really what we lack is like entering the zone. Like we need a Claude Giroux replacement. That's essentially our problem. We don't have a guy like that in the system. We have two-way guys. We have guys who have some size. We have guys who can shoot some degree, especially the younger guys. But we definitely don't have a dynamic center. So, I don't think it's out of this world that they would go for a defenseman. But I do think the dynamic center will probably be top of our list at this point, playmaking type of guy. Vasili, I don't know. Do you have a comment on that? Or
yeah, I would say Cooley would be ideal. I just don't know. I mean, obviously he's probably not going to be around. I was just wondering, do you think that Cooley has the potential to maybe even unseat Shane Wright and go number 1? Could you see something like that happening? And I don't know if you have any thoughts. I was wondering on a Tristan Leno, because I know he's supposed to be around that 10 to 15 area. You think that would be good if the Flyers are going to go defense? Would you go with the Leno?
Well, all right. So can Cooley unseat Shane Wright? It would take a lot. Now, remember that these are little tiny metrics, right? So,
yeah.
So to me, I create a draft resume. I like to focus on how well a player is playing in a certain role. Is he a top line center or is he a second line center? Is he on a good team or a bad team? Is he on the top power play unit? Is he a penalty killer? When the team loses or they're trailing, where do most of his points come from? These are all the things I look at. And I can tell you right now that Shane Wright and Cooley both play for very high-powered offenses, okay? Kingston has like 6 guys who are averaging close to a point a game of 5. So they have like 2 legit lethal scoring lines, much like the NTDP. They got 2 as well. Cooley is the number 1 center for the NTDP's top scoring line, and Wright is the number 1 center for Kingston's top scoring line, but he's not. But Cooley's the leading scorer for the NTDP, And Wright is not the leading scorer for Kingston. Far from it, actually. I think he's about like maybe 6, 7, 8 points. And he's got like 3 or 4 guys ahead of him, although I don't know if that's changed. So you know how these scouts are. All it takes is like one tournament. They based everything. Last year's draft was entirely based off of the U18 World Championship, where Mason McTavish destroyed everybody, and he got picked ahead of a lot of guys that we thought had a better overall season than McTavish. And so, to answer your question, Wright would have to continue the track he's on. Like, it's basically like, I'd say Wright has kind of been like leveled off a little bit. Like there's nothing dynamic about Wright's draft season. It seems like we're going off of a lot of what he did last year, although he was pretty hot after the World Juniors or before. But Cooley's been like this. And the fact that he made Team USA as a first-year draft eligible, as a 17-year-old, that's very rare. And on top of that, he was a line driver and he made plays, and people saw him do that. Whereas I was very disappointed in the 2 games that Wright played for Canada. Even though Canada was loaded, like Wright kind of played a little disinterested, and
he was kind of under the radar. You didn't really notice him too much. And like
no. I mean,
always love the players that are kind of rising and just like playing.
Why does this remind me of Nolan Patrick?
That's what I was gonna say.
Getting outseeded by Heischer.
Of Patrick.
Well, listen, what helped Heischer were the World Juniors and the top prospects game. So it's always like little things like that. But again, it's a slippery slope when you're using these events as the sole reason why you're going to pass or take a kid. But I don't know. I really think that guys like Savoy and guys like Cooley, guys like Danila Yurov, I mean, a lot of these kids are playing in the men's leagues in Europe. And Joachim Kamel, I mean, he was the leading scorer in the league, in a men's league.
Wow.
For about 2 weeks. And then he got hurt right before the World Juniors. So
18 points in 21 games.
Yeah. And he basically, and he played on the same team as Brad Lambert. And everyone was like, Brad Lambert's the better guy, including myself. And after 3 weeks, we're like, all right, that's a big sample size. Your teammate now is the leading scorer in the freaking league, and you're not doing anything. I got to give the edge to the teammate, Kamel. As far as Luneau, listen, Luneau, I think 3 years ago, or maybe even 2 years ago, was a lock to be the first defenseman taken in this draft. And then I think he had an injury issue, and he was good last year. I like the way he played, but this year it was a little bit of a slow start. But the more I'm doing this draft stuff, I'm learning that, you know what, these slow starts, who cares? Because I tweeted out. There was a player who had a really bad start, and it was Jordan Kyrou, that in 2016, I'm like, he's got like 2 goals in 18 games. I'm going to drop him. And he's so flashy. He's too offensive. He turns the puck over. And now I'm like, the guy's a freaking all-star in the NHL, 2nd round pick. He's a steal, even from that draft class. So I'm a little bit more cautious but Luneau is a guy, if you watch the way he controls a game, he's so calm. He's reliable. He's elusive. He's got pretty good size. He's got the great hands. He's like that on-ice leader. And, when Canada played all those international games, was it the Olympic Youth Festivals? He was their number 1 defenseman on a team that had guys like Ty Nelson and Lindgren and a couple of the other guys, Matichuk, that, so when you are the centerpiece on that group at a young age, 16, 17 years old, and that doesn't really leave you unless you do something really egregious to hurt your stock. And Luneau hasn't done that. So I saw that Central Scouting put him at 10th overall North America. I think that's quite deserving. I had him at 10 in my preseason ranking, so I'm not going to drop him down too much from that. But I mean, do the Flyers really need a right defenseman who's kind of like offensive minded and a kind of cool, calm, collected guy? I mean,
use him. I mean, I think it all depends on who's there for them at center at that point. If they can get somebody at center around that 10, 15, to number 5, it's going to be hard to know where they're going to pick, obviously, at this point. But they can get a flashy center who kind of, models their game almost to like a Zegras or something along those lines. Right. That's somebody they're going to want to pick up. But if a center, if like it's a two-way center who's kind of on the board at that point, I would not be surprised for them to go defense. And somebody like Leno, has all the tools. He's got that elusiveness offensively, and then also is very calm and poised as well in his own end. So I could see them going for him as well.
Yeah, and let me ask you this, and it's a great point, Vasili. One, you're getting me super excited about this draft, Steve. I'm not gonna lie.
No, get excited.
No, because I can kind of tell typically by what you say, because I've been listening to you for a while. And when you have enough guys that you can get sincerely excited about in that top 15 range, I mean, we're talking about chaos in the draft at this point. We're talking about guys getting taken in the middle of the draft that could be superstars, like a Matthew Barzal, right? Who went way too late in the draft. When I love seeing stuff like that, and that's the opportunity for the Flyers that if they are going to trade Claude Giroux this year and they do get maybe a mid-round pick or even a late-round pick, this is the type of draft you can start a rebuild, not even a rebuild, a retool. The Flyers did with Provorov and TK back in the day. To walk away with that type of level of talent. Yeah. It's really what we're looking to do here. And it seems like this is a great opportunity for this. I want to bring this up. One, I find it funny that there's another Jack Hughes in this draft.
Yes.
Which is funny.
Because
I was like, yeah.
He's a Giroux type too. He's stylistically the similarities too.
Well, so we can talk about Jack Hughes, and I'm interested in that. But I'm interested, again, I want to dig into a little bit more what you said about the USNTDP. So you're talking about Cooley, right? And you're saying that Cooley and who was the other guy? I'm sorry, I forget his name.
Gauthier?
Yeah. That you're saying that the two of them compared to a Hughes and Zegras.
I'm sorry, Nazer the third.
Nazer, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, it was Nazer. I was trying to remember. So the two of them, if you're saying it's kind of like a 1-2 punch of those guys, we see the impact. And Jack Hughes is undersized and it seems like they're a little bit bigger than him, but it took a little bit longer for him and Zegras, right? They didn't just come into the NHL and dominate, but they obviously are making a huge impact now. That program is making a huge impact. I like what Vasili is asking there, but if they're really comparison to that, do you think that there's a chance that USNTDP does get favored just from the program alone and the reputation that it has? And even a guy like John Beecher, who was taken, I think it was number 30th in the draft. If I'm a GM and I look at the pedigree of that program, I'm taking a guy from that program.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's kind of the case? Yeah. Where it'll be favored over other leagues, even if they're playing against men?
So I've been studying this for about 7-8 years now. And I can tell you right now that if you're good, you're good. All right. I know that's not that profound, but what I mean that we always like to say, well, this guy was in a men's league and this guy's playing in junior hockey against teenagers and this guy's playing against college guys. The reality is that every development league has produced elite NHL talent. Okay. Cale McCarr played in the AHL.
I was just bringing that up.
Okay. Yep. And he is arguably the most dynamic defenseman in the NHL right now, where, he's on pace for 40 goals.
Yeah. He's the new Erik Karlsson.
He's the new Paul Coffey, probably. I mean, we're talking about he did 40 goals. Who's the last guy to do it? But I think that what appeals to people about the NTDP is that the NTDP really mirrors an NHL team more than any other program, because all these kids are going to probably make the NHL or come really close to it, right? They know that they're the best of the best. They really are. They have these intense tryouts. With Canada, we get that in glimpses, right? The Hlinka team is the best U18 team Canada puts together, right? They didn't do it this year because of COVID, but if you look at the U18 Hlinka rosters from the previous 15, 20 years or 10 years, I mean, it is ridiculous. The names on there, McDavid's, the Marners, and all of them have been there. But with this particular program, they live with each other. They know that they're courted. They know that the big college programs are after them. They know that the big NHL programs have been scouting them. But on top of all that, and they all kind of learn the same system, right? It's an up-tempo attacking style. It's fast. It's finesse. It's skill. But they're also disciplined. They're not disciplined in terms of like John Beach is not very disciplined. He's a little bit of a dirty hitter. But in terms of decision making, the way that they handle the puck, and then off the ice as well, is that these kids, it's almost like if you put that uniform on, you have to act a certain way on and off the ice. I know a lot of programs expect that out of their prospects, but there's just, like I said, I've been around that program for a while. I know a lot of people in and out of it, and it's amazing. It's like same thing with Hockey Canada, where the minute you put that jersey on, you're going to play a certain way. So it's a shame that Canada doesn't do the same thing. I wish they did. They had a UA team.
I was just about to. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I was like,
the CHL would lose it. They would lose too much money. They would lose. The CHL cities would lose a star, and that community would get hurt from it. Whereas, and hockey means a lot more to Canada than it means to us. So sure. I kind of understand it in that regard. But, I do want to clarify, though. I know that I said that Nazar III and Cooley are like a Hughes and Zegras. Zegras and Hughes were special. I mean, they were scoring like 2.5 points a game in their draft years. I think it's a little step below, but you're still looking at two centers with extreme dynamic playmaking ability, right? That's what they do best, is playmaking. They're fast, they're elusive, they spin, they twirl, they dangle, they deke. And that's what you saw a lot of Hughes and Zegras do. And so, like I said, it's going to be another great year for the NTDP. And I think it's a realistic goal for them to get 8 or 9 kids in the first round this year. I really do. Yeah, that's awesome. Vasili, do you have anything you want to ask there?
I was just wondering about like the international players. Who do you think we're going to see go first off the board for the international guys this year?
That's wide open, man. It really is. It's a great question. It really is, because we have enough data right now to at least create that group. And so my group, like I had to reward, I felt like I had to. Now I love Kamel because I saw him at the U18 Worlds last year. He hits everything. He's a truck. He's not that big. He's about 6 foot, but he destroys everything. He's almost like a Podkolzin in his draft year, but more controlled. Podkolzin's like a methodical guy who like dropped his quick first step and then he's gone, or you misjudged him. Whereas Kamel plays at a very, very fast pace. But then at the same time, you got Brad Lambert, who we've all felt has been this high-profile guy. People have been sharpshooting him because he gave an opponent the finger. Ooh, big deal. It's one thing to give your coach the finger like Patrick Laine did, but Brad Lambert scored a goal and he gave the guy a finger on his way to the bench, like, hey, F you.
I'm sure worse has been said.
Yeah. So you have Lambert and Kamel from Finland. Then you have the 3 Russians now. We thought it was only going to be 2. Yurov, the center or the wing, and Miroshnichenko, the big, mean, think of prime Milan Lucic, right? Don't think of current Milan Lucic. Think of like 2011 or 10 Milan Lucic, where he's basically unstoppable and every team in the league wants him. But then the 3rd Russian is this kid Perivalov, he's scoring goals at a ridiculous rate. He's one of the top scorers in the Russian Junior League. No one expected that. He's got great size. He's a two-way type. He scores shorthanded goals. He's a breakaway threat. So, and then from Sweden, you have like 8 forwards and like 3 defensemen who could be in the first round. Noah Oslin, Leka Ramaki, probably one of the hardest shooters in the draft, the right wing for Gardens. Olgren, whom I'm forgetting a whole bunch. The defenseman, you have Salomonson, and then you have Havelid, Ludwig Persson, the other wing, scoring wing. And these are just the European. I haven't even talked about Slovakia, because Slovakia now is throwing their hand to the ring, where they have Slavkovsky and Nemec. They're going to be, I would say, almost guaranteed locks to be top 15 picks. But then you have the other kid, Mashar, who made the team, the World Junior team. All 3 of those guys made the World Junior team for Slovakia. And if you watch those 2 games, one against the U.S. and one against Sweden, they gave him a hard time both times. And Slovakia almost won the Helenka before losing to the Russians in that title game. So this is a great European crop, heavy on forwards, but you got the 2 defensemen, the Czech Jiricek and the Slovak Nemec. Yeah. But I mean, Arizona and Buffalo, I think they have at least 3 first-round picks apiece. I think Arizona's got 4, maybe.
I'll check it right now.
Yeah, so they're gonna have a lot of fun. Those fans are gonna have a lot. Probably be doing all those podcasts and radio spots for them. But it's a. If you can't tell how excited I am about this draft. Last year I was like, Yeah, it's
it was
all
not.
right.
Really
It was
deep,
not
a
like
lot of
this.
really good players, and I mean, at least from the international side, I got to see a little bit of Yurov, and he looks really intriguing. Obviously, with the Russian guys, it's hard because you never know when they're going to come over after they get drafted. But he
Yeah.
looks like a dynamic player.
So just to clarify, it's 3 first-round picks for both teams, but Arizona has 8 picks in the first 2 rounds.
And I mean, if they trade Chychrun, they're going to have another first-round pick. I don't know if they're going to wait till next year to try to.
Yeah, so unless that
absolutely
kid,
insanity.
if that kid is asking to be traded, then that's fair. But why would you? He's 23.
It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Franchise defenseman. He had a Norris caliber season last year. Why? I mean, I'm going to guess he wants to leave. But I mean, the thing about Arizona is a lot of guys don't like leaving there. They like the quality of life. The families,
great place to live.
So it's like, look at Phil Kessel. He's like, I ain't going anywhere. You know what I'm saying? I'm quite happy here making my $8 million on $7 million a year. And I talked to one reporter after the game, and I get to go home to my my ranch, my palm tree ranch resort. I mean,
yeah. Well, you don't think he's going to take he's a UFA, right? And they're probably not going to re-sign him. You don't think he's going to take a crack at, waiving his no trade clause?
He's already won 2 cups.
That's a great point, actually.
What does he have left? I mean, remember Shane Doan? He went to the same. Remember Shane Doan was like, he's a UFA every year. He's a UFA. Trade Shane Doan. He's no more than a trade board. Shane Doan's like, I'm leaving.
He cried when he eventually did leave.
Please, Shane, leave. We need the prospect. No. I am not leaving. They're like, oh, okay. I mean, but there are going to be so many storylines about this draft. That's why I kind of put the NHL prospects to the side this year on the blog, because I really want to be so locked in and have all my information, tightened up when it comes to that stretch. Because listen, the one thing about the NHL standings right now, we know that the East is, for the most part, is locked up.
Yeah.
Detroit is, I think, like 5 points back of Boston, but Boston has like 8 games in hand or 5 games in hand.
Yeah.
The West is crazy. The West is going to be nuts because there's like 10 teams fighting for 3 spots. But, look at the bottom 5 teams of the league. They're horrible. Ottawa, Seattle, Montreal, Buffalo, and I'm missing one, Arizona. They're Chicago, they're 6. They're done. Their season's been over.
Flyers aren't that far.
Yeah, you can put the Flyers in there too.
I'll tell you why I'm not going to write the Flyers off, okay? Is because they played a ton of games on the road.
Yes,
and they have the best teams in the league. Chunk. Remember I talked about this on the podcast?
Yes. Yeah, you called it ahead of time. Yep.
I said they have the deciding point of the season is this stretch of games where they're going to, I think it's like 75% of the next 20 or 25 games is at home. And so if they can't win, if they don't have the freaking intestinal fortitude to put forth a good effort. Now, I've been watching them too a little bit. There's a lot of bad luck.
Oh, yeah. Injuries.
Bad luck. It's not like they're a bad team. You look at that lineup, obviously not involving the COVID issues. And it's like they should be a lot better. So, they did really well on the Yo after the firing. And now they're kind of, and they lost, I think, the first 2 games of this homestand.
But they have 5 losses, not all in regulation in a row. Again, a lot had to do with the fact that they were at one point short 9 starters.
Well, look at all the games that they have coming up, right? I think I took a look at it. I'm not. Let me pull it up. Okay, yeah, it's all division and conference games outside of like 1 or 2. So they're playing the Islanders.
If they can win these games, they can make up a lot of ground. It's just are they going to be able to kind of put together a good effort to do so. So that's
I'm not going to write them off. I'm going to be that guy. I'm not going to write them off just yet, even though I just said that the East is locked up. But I think if there's the Devils, the Islanders, they're too far back, even though they have all those games in hand. I think Columbus isn't for real. That like they had a little bit of a run. I'll be
honest with you, Steve. Right now the Islanders are 7 games behind the Flyers, and they are behind by what is that? 7 points.
Yeah, but the Islanders can't score.
Neither can the Flyers.
They've had so
which is shocking.
Yeah. I saw that too.
No. Normally I completely agree with you, Steve, and I want to get back to the draft, but this year with the Flyers, like if you catch more of the games, like there have only been a handful of games where they actually possess the puck for the majority of the game. They are consistently chasing this year.
Yeah.
This is why AV was fired. We'll dig in AV a little bit, and I do want to talk about that too. But this is why I'm getting excited about this draft, because I'm like, okay, if they're really going to screw up this year, it seems to me like this is kind of the year to do it. A lot of times when the Flyers have been bad, they've been bad in a year where the draft wasn't the best, right? Like we took JVR at number 2 behind Patrick Kane, right? But that draft was not loaded. Yes, you can look at the Nolan Patrick draft as a failure to some degree, right? Though I'd argue injuries has really ruined him more than him being a bad player. But again, another year where it wasn't like the strongest draft. And this year, this draft is like, from what I'm looking at and what you're just explaining to me, it's ridiculous. When I see this many European players that are that good playing against men, then the U.S. program loaded, and then Canada still having elite players. I mean, if you are rebuilding, this is kind of the year to do it. When you say that,
yeah, and then 2023, you got the Mitchkov Bedard sweepstakes. You know what I mean? And then on top of that, after that, them you have Jaeger, and I mean, there's so many quality kids for the 2023 crop as well. And so, we talked about this before, and I know, if the Flyers, they've never really done a full rebuild. I think Hextall wanted to, right? That was what he wanted to do. And it looked like it was heading the right direction, but we never found that consistency. With the Flyers, it was never a glide path where it was like, 75 points and then 81 points and then 93 points and then 110 points. And then it's always been up and down, up and down. And that's, I think, because it's like the Rangers where you have a demanding fan base and you got to keep the arena full. But, and for all the talk we said about how strong the Flyers prospect pool is, they went out and they acquired veterans. They went out and they made, now the Atkinson move was lateral, right? And it's worked out to a degree. But, to trade away youth and prospects or, up and coming guys for a Ryan Ellis, and in Nashville, they said he was regressing. That's why they got rid of him. And then for Ristolainen, and he could do nothing right in Buffalo. And that's why eventually they got rid of him. What are the Flyers doing exactly? And maybe 2020 kind of convinced us all that, wait, no, this team is that close. And last year was just a bump in the road. We'll blame COVID. And if we just retool in the offseason, we'll be right back to where we were in 2020, which is, one game away from the conference finals. And I'm starting to think, if you look at the way things are operating with the Rangers and the Devils and now Columbus, that maybe the Flyers should start thinking, with the cap, the issues that, maybe you write a letter. Maybe you do what the Rangers did. You write a letter to the fan base. You say, you know what? It just hasn't really worked out the way we wanted it to. We're going to start, we're going to go just full-blown rebuild at least 1 year. And maybe don't do that this year because you can't, right? Because you have, you have a decent lineup, I guess, and you're not going to out-lose all the other bad teams in the league. But maybe next year you say, you know what? Not really tank, but look who's at the top of the draft. 2 of the greatest prospects we've seen since Ovechkin and Crosby and McDavid.
Instead.
So it's just an idea. I know Flyers fans don't want to hear it. The other thing is
a lot too at this point.
The East is tough, man. The East is a really tough conference. It's not the West. You got to deal with Toronto and Florida and Tampa and Boston. Boston, they don't lose. And no matter how old this team gets, they don't lose. They get all these weird guys from the AHL and 49-year-old college free agents, and they come in and they're on the third line and they score and they win games for them. So, I don't know. I'm still very confident in the prospects that they've accumulated, but it's like what you said. You got to get that centerpiece. So, where's that Lindros? So where's that Giroux?
Right.
To kind of lead them. I think Farabee is a great player, but I don't really see him as a,
he's like a guy who'd be playing with Lindros.
Exactly.
Right, on that top line.
Yeah. I compare Wolves to a Justin Williams. I've been seeing that get thrown around. He's very savvy, can score a lot of goals in big moments for you.
Yeah.
But he's not going to be, the player that you're going to build your entire franchise around. He's a good, first, second line player. And that's not a bad thing to have. You need those players to build around.
I think he's a definite first line guy. I don't think he's because he's already that guy for us, and he's
already their best goal scorer.
Yeah, I think he's definitely on track
round.
to be a legitimate star player. But if
Yeah.
you're talking about a guy to build around, you need a guy who's putting up 90 points a year.
Yeah, which he's going to be more like maybe 80,
He's
70.
like, he reminds me of a Simone Gagne, a guy you throw him with Peter Forsberg and he'll be a 40 goal scorer. But on his own, he's like 35.
The thing is like if you look around the league, like in the conference especially, like Florida, if you're an opponent and you look at the schedule, you're like, shit, Ball, Corbin, Huberdeau, great. Tampa, Point and Kucherov and Stamkos, great. Boston, perfection line. Toronto, Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner. Pittsburgh, Crosby and Malkin. As old as they are, they're still doing it. Washington, Ovechkin and Backstrom. And now the Rangers with, Panarin and Panarin. And they got some other guys there.
It's a team effort there for sure.
Yeah, but the goalie is really the reason why they're even.
It's almost like you kind of need not even that one centerpiece, but you need kind of that dynamic duo of two guys. Okay, if one guy has an off night, we have him to still come and step up.
And the Flyers, even in 2010, when they were like a low seed and they had to win on. If you looked at those top two lines, you had Carter, Richards. Giroux, it was.
We had Briere. We had a ridiculous team.
Yeah, it was a Simone Gagne was. So it's like I think JVR was on that team too, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And he was like a depth guy. He wasn't really playing. I don't think he was playing 18, 19 minutes a game.
Like third line, basically him. It was like him, Giroux, Aaron Asham, third line.
Yeah. So and I think that's what really helped the Flyers. Of course, having Pronger and them help, but it really helped as the opposition is like shit. I got to deal with these two lines now, and the Flyers. We thought they had that 2 years ago, right? With Kevin Hayes coming in and like, okay, wow, he gives us now that second scoring line. The fact that they have goal scoring issues this year, really, really surprising. Really surprising.
Yeah. But well, let's get into this actually, because I like where you're segueing, and we were talking about this prior to filming, and obviously we came into this year with AV and Michel Therrien and Mike Yeo at the helm, and now we only have Mike Yeo. Personally, I think Fletcher screwed up by bringing AV back. I think there were enough signs to say, last year they lost the locker room and that it was bound to happen again. It happened again, arguably just as bad as it did last year, and he had no choice but to kind of pull the trigger there. This is not a team on paper that should be getting trounced by teams. Maybe they're not a championship team, but on paper, when healthy, they should be good enough to compete with most teams in the league. And right now, Claude Giroux is unsigned after being here his whole career, and he has a no-trade clause. And not that he's going to walk, he's most likely going to waive it. Flyers are talking about moving their Hall of Fame guy who, quite frankly, still has it. He's still putting up points. He leads the team in points. And there seems to be something wrong inherently here in Philadelphia. We don't know exactly what it is. Everybody's searching. Everybody's searching through draft history, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Everybody's searching who's the problem. And I don't think Chuck Fletcher had like an awful offseason. I don't think he's a terrible GM or anything like that. I didn't like Michel Therrien. Everybody who listens to this knows I never liked Michel Therrien. I never wanted him here. But we removed Michel Therrien. We moved AV. Fletcher's kind of late to that draw. He made excuses about stuff this year, which really bothered me about the power play. And then immediately when he got rid of Therrien, the power play started doing better. It's like there's something wrong with the leadership group here. And you mentioned this in Vasili. You can chime in too if you have additional questions, but I want to go to Steve on this. AV, right? You obviously have been around the game for a while. You've seen Chuck Fletcher be GM. You've seen Michel Therrien coach. Like when you look at those combinations of things that happen with those coaches getting removed, with the lack of progress, and then Fletcher brought in here and make these moves, which obviously you weren't a humongous fan of. You thought they were all right, but you didn't love. And I got a lot of shit for saying that I wouldn't have done the Ellis trade. Not because I don't think Ryan Ellis is a good player. I was just like, why are we giving up on our youth already? But what do you see when you look at something like that? When you see the talent underperforming, the GM, who he is, the coaches.
Well, you just said it. The coaches. I mean, it's a coaching carousel. The coaching carousel has to stop. You had Berube. He leaves. He goes and he wins a cup. You had, Laviolette. I mean, I don't know. I think that A goaltender. I'm not putting this on Carter Hart. I'm not putting this on Jones or any of the past goalies. But again, like the Flyers need that one goalie, right? Because you look at you're right. Look at the scores: 5-1, 7-3, 6-2. They should not be losing games like that. And it's almost like we saw last year as well, where when they get down, it's like tiny heart syndrome, right? Like they just can't claw out of it. They can't fight back. And there's certain thing they say, like winning is contagious, but you know what else is contagious?
Losing. Coming
back, like a fight at the end. So even if you lose, we see this in the NFL all the time. How many times you see in the NFL where a team is going to like lose 38-0 and then, they'll empty the bench and then they'll come back and they'll make a game interesting in the fourth quarter. And then the next week they'll play a better game and not get blown out and maybe even win a game. It's the same thing in hockey where, and I follow this stuff. I really can't quantify it, but it's what I look for is I look at the box scores every night. I study every single box score. I go over it. I look at the shot totals. I look at the quality of the shots, situational things. And the Flyers, more so than any other team, I've noticed that when they're down, they don't rally back. It's like if it's 3-1 in the third period, we're done. We're not coming back. Just wrap it up. And, if you could find a way early in the season to pull off some type of a comeback win. Now, that doesn't always win or work. Ottawa had that huge comeback win against Toronto, and they still stunk. It's one thing that the Flyers need an identity, right? They don't have an identity. Are they an offensive team? Are they a physical team? Are they a comeback team? Are they a goaltending team? And so I think that, when you looked at the 2010 team, and I know I keep bringing it up, but as much as it pains me being a Ranger fan, but it was a fun team. And not just because they, went to the Cup, but why did they get to the Cup? They went to the Cup because they did not quit.
They were resilient, yeah.
And so when I think of the Flyers, I think of a tough matchup. And the last year and a half, they've been freaking tissue paper. They've been too easy to play against. And I don't think it's the players' fault, because they have high energy competitive guys. We talked about Farabee and Atkinson. These guys are hard workers. I think maybe, bringing in a new coach, but I mean, do you bring in a disciplinarian? You bring in a jerk who, it worked for Mike Keenan. I don't know. Is that maybe what I don't know. It's different. Plays are different nowadays than let's say 20, 30 years ago. Ken Hitchcock got a lot out of his gang, and he wasn't the nicest guy. But because Vigneault is like a passive aggressive kind of a guy. Like he's not a rah-rah yeller, right, but he's like, he always came across as a kind of a, dry sense of humor, kind of, I don't know. He never really pegged me as like let's be honest with you. He was successful because he had good goalies. He had good goalies in Vancouver. He had good goalies.
You have Henrik Lundqvist or Roberto Luongo. I think anybody can, make something out of that sometimes.
Yeah.
And quite frankly,
I don't know.
Hart's the reason we were winning it all.
I was going to say, he's actually bounced back. I mean, and that's I should have added that he's actually bounced back. And but you either bring in a new coach who is going to at least try to, but then again, wasn't it LePerrier down in Lehigh Valley? Was he like, I'm going to be mean, and and we were like, well, I don't know if that's going to really work with young kids, but
yeah. Well, to his credibility, they started off really poorly, and they've actually been doing really well. They've shown a lot of fight. They have fans, and they're losing a lot of. But he's not going to be an NHL coach here. No. LePerrier is not brought in here for that. No, but I definitely think it's, and I'm sorry if I cut you off, Vasili. I definitely think it's a coaching issue. And let me ask you this though: do you think that the GM? Because I've worked at jobs, you worked at jobs, you were in the military. Leadership. You've dealt with it before. Leadership is usually top down. If the people don't believe in themselves and don't believe that they're awesome, and I use the example of Laviolette when he said that Claude Giroux was the best player in the National Hockey League. Like Laviolette wasn't like Mr. Nice Guy, but he believed in the talent he had in the room. He did to the point where he even got fired. And I would look for a coach like that. But do you think that stems from Fletcher? I mean, not that Fletcher, I don't think Fletcher's stupid. I don't think he's a bad GM, but I do look at, a team like Minnesota who never really got over the edge. Always they were a good team. They were competitive, but they were never good enough. there is also him learning from the past. I don't want to say he's never going to get past it. He's not like an old guy.
Yeah.
What do you see from Fletcher? A lot of people here don't believe in him. I've heard people say that prior to the season. Like people I know that really love hockey and play hockey, they don't believe in Fletcher. They didn't, they were willing to give AV a shot. But Fletcher doesn't necessarily garner as much confidence as like somebody like Hextall did when he first came in here.
Well, like you said, Hextall had a plan, right? And so with Fletcher, it's almost like he's acting like it's 1985 or like 1990. Like, well, I'm just going to trade and get veterans and like, oh, so you inherited this farm system with a lot of high picks and young guys. But I'm going to keep making trades and I'm going to go, oh, there's a reclamation project. Oh, he was a first round pick 8 years ago. Well, let's give him a shot. And I don't know if that really works anymore. And I think that Hextall's plan, I think clearly was to fix the goaltending. He understood that the last time anytime the Flyers were dominant, with 2010 being the exception with Lighton but that anytime the Flyers went on a deep run, right? Conference final, Stanley Cup, they had a Pelly Lindbergh or a Ron Hextall or whichever veteran they acquired at the time. It was always they'll get Van Beesbrook. Yeah. So, but they had somebody in goal that could offer them stability. And I think Hextall saw that. That's why he was drafting. It seemed like 3 or 2 goalies every draft.
Yes.
He's like a law of averages. I'm going to find the guy. And it looks like it's not completely out of the realm of possibility that it could be a 1-2 punch of Carter Hart and Sandstrom, right?
Yeah.
Or Person.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, but like I said, it seems like that his moves are more about for the now, but I don't really think he's really thinking about the strategic big picture of what the conference and the division looks like. That, Washington and Pittsburgh, they're going to be old soon, and maybe they haven't drafted all that well because they haven't had any picks. Right? Washington and Pittsburgh and DC have like the lowest amount of picks out of anybody in the league the last 5-6 years, but they're not going anywhere. They keep winning. And so I don't know. Like, it just seems like the Flyers, the Islanders are a great example too, because they had a strategy. They're like, we're old. Okay. We got a young goalie. We got this dynamic center, but we're old and I'm an old GM and I'm going to do old things, but back-to-back conference finals against Tampa Bay, almost went to the cup last year. Obviously, this year's a big problem, but so I don't know what the strategy is. I don't know what his plan is.
I think you nailed it.
And I think that's why you admit failure when you wave the white flag and write a letter to the season ticket holders and say, hey, we're going to rebuild. Well, gee, that's great. Why don't you do that 2 years ago? Well, you couldn't do that 2 years ago. You just came off a nice playoff run. So
it's really hard to know where they're going, at least like identity wise. And we talked about that a ton last week too. Mm-hmm. And like, it seems almost like it's kind of a top down thing foundationally. Like, I mean, the GM doesn't seem to know the direction the team is going in. I don't know if that trickles down and the players feel that as well. And there's kind of just an uncertainty clouding things. And that's the tough thing. And it's not even that Fletcher's a bad GM, because I mean, realistically, if you look at every single move he made this offseason, they kind of actually all worked out, aside from the Ellis trade, which is kind of a wash considering Ellis has played 4 games and Patrick and Myers have had limited gameplay. But I mean, Cam Atkinson scored 15 goals. Rasmus Ristolainen looks like a decent, second pairing defenseman versus what he was in Buffalo. Derek Brassard's been the best he has in years, at least in terms of point production. Those moves have been good, and it's almost ironic that a lot of his moves have worked out, and despite that, the team's still as bad as they are. So that even shows what he was trying, even though it has worked. It hasn't really translated to success on the ice for the team. And as we're looking into the future for the Flyers, I would think that he's still going to get one more head coaching hire, and he's still going to be, behind the helm for this offseason. And it kind of worries me to see, what are they going to try? Because, I mean, he's already done the retool this past offseason and it never worked. So is he going to go? Is he the guy you're going to go scorched earth with? As a GM, I don't think he's the right fit for that. And he's likely going to be around for this offseason. So I don't know if they're really going to go that rebuilding route, because I think with him as the GM, it's not something that he's going to kind of lean towards. So we'll see, I guess.
You're allowed to use hindsight when you're assessing GMs, and knowing what we know now about Fletcher's that the move, and I agree with you, the moves that he's made. I didn't agree with the Ellis move because, like I said, I'm in Nashville. I watched them kind of like regress a little bit, but and I'm not a big fan of trading first round picks because I'm a draft guy. But I think the moves that he made, I think those moves should have been made in the 2020 offseason.
I agree.
You know what I mean? Because like, oh my God, look how close we were.
Let's make all these moves and see what happens.
No, and I can't, off the top of my head, I can't recall what the cap situation was. So obviously, you know, and
it wasn't bad.
But you know, when you have a miserable season like they had, and you take on all these veterans, that's like basically a 50-50 shot. How many times have we seen teams in every sport? The Eagles, remember that one big offseason? Was it 2011? The Mets in the early 90s, the Rangers in
load up on veterans, yeah.
Where they go and they say, we're going to win the offseason Super Bowl, right? We're going to win the offseason Stanley Cup. We're going to get everybody who is a free agent and whatever, but we sucked last year. So we're going to count on all these guys to fix it. Now, again, off the top of my head, like I worked for the Dallas Stars in the late 90s. They did the same thing and it worked for them. And they became actually a Stanley Cup champion because of it. But so, like I said, there's got to be a happy medium, right? But again, at the same time, it could have been Vigneault. That we have to ask the question: did the Flyers do as well as they did in 2020 because of the long layoff, and they were rested, and they were able to go back and watch more film and study and strategize, and they caught lightning in a bottle because they had the round robin portion, and they got their legs under them, and that's how they were able to. I don't know, but. After what we saw last year and the horrific effort, it came back again.
Yes.
And so as a G, you have to say, well, listen, GM, like the same shit's happening again.
With different players.
Yeah.
Different players, new coach now, but here we go. We're in another losing stretch and we're giving up a lot of goals. Well, not as much now as they did on the Vigneault. But, I think for Fletcher to go, it would have to be another catastrophic, 12 game losing streak.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, what else can we do? And
I think I like what you said a lot. I don't sense that there is some kind of plan here, even with the moves in the offseason. I didn't hate them. I was like, okay, I bought into that. My whole thing was like, if you have a coach that's not getting the most out of the players you currently have, that already is a problem to me.
Yeah.
That's what bothers me the most, and we can get into this now, is that, people wanted Patrick gone, and this is from Flyers fan base, right? We wanted Patrick gone. They were over Phil Myers. They're now over Ivan Provorov. They've been over Travis Sanheim, and now now he's great. Carter Hart was bad for 1 year. Nobody's lost faith in him, really, but Travis Konechny, everybody's like, yeah, we're over him, get him out of town. We can just keep going down the list. Guys who have had success here, like Konechny 2 years ago was an all-star.
Those are all talented players. Right?
Yeah,
and
they're underachieving here. And, I get concerned when I see a team with talent and young talent and see that talent not flourish, and then see them go other places. And people even say, they're like, oh, we're going to trade Konechny, and then he's going to go do really well outside of Philly. Well, why? Why are you saying that? Then we're the problem.
Yeah, we are the problem. We have to pinpoint or somehow realize what that is that's causing this, right? And that's the tough thing that Fletcher and the staff needs to really look at themselves in the mirror for, I think.
Well, and that's why I pointed to Vigneault, and I'm like, when you lost the locker room the year before, you shouldn't have, after those games against the Rangers, where they were embarrassed and there was no effort, my mind goes, you lost the room, you lost these players. I need somebody who will lead them. You're not an idiot. You're not a bad coach, but you're not the right coach for this team. And it's like, I feel like that, even, I'll bring up the Rangers again, going out and getting Gallant, they didn't have to go do that, right? Quinn wasn't a terrible coach. No. They're like, this team is better.
They improved every year under him.
Right. But they're like, this team is better even than what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I would say we need to search for that.
That always needs to be the attitude where oh, look at us, we're doing decent, that's fine. It's almost like The Flyers need to not be satisfied with just doing decent, but kind of building like, okay, if we're not firing on all cylinders, something needs to change, right? And that speaks to what the Rangers did. They didn't like the situation, even though they didn't have a bad season last season, and they changed things around. So
I think getting rid of just one thing that isn't working out is the fact that you have Giroux and he's doing so well, but you're not winning. And when that happens, then that's almost like it's like the writing's on the wall, where you have a guy who's a veteran, he's a pending free agent, and he's producing, and he's had success, and he's playing at a star level, but the team stinks. You got to recoup. You got to basically, no matter what the fans say or no matter how much they love him and will miss him, you got to find a way to get assets in return for that. You have to.
That's what's best for the organization. They don't. Right?
I didn't want to see it, but it's without a doubt.
It's inevitable. It's inevitable.
And I would say, and honestly, I would go down the list. And I'm not saying do a full rebuild, but here's the thing about the Konechny's and the Farabys and the Scott Lawtons and the Couturiers is, when you already remove Voracek, you're going to remove Giroux. You get rid of JVR. Well, JVR signed, isn't he? So
he's got 1 year left.
Okay. But I would argue that he's probably might be on the way out.
Let these young guys just say, hey, you know what? The media's going to come to you now, Joel Farabee. The media's going to come to you. They're not going to go right to Giroux's locker. They're not going to go right to JVR's locker because he's going to always take the heat rounds for the young guys. No, you have to step up now, and it's like sink or swim. And why not try it out and see? And again, I'm not saying full-blown rebuild because I think that the guys that they have there are good enough to carry the team to at least mediocrity. And the other, as tough as the Eastern Conference is, you could still be in the conversation, all right? And right now the Flyers is still mathematically in the conversation. So, if we all had the answers to this, we wouldn't be doing this. We'd have another job. And so... but to tie it all back to the draft is, they have their first round pick. I don't think they have a second though.
No, traded this year and next.
But so you have to think that if his scouts are assessing this draft as a strong one, that maybe Fletch is going to have to bite the bullet and say, you know what, it failed. We tried, we gave it a shot. Now let's try to get some assets back for the next 2 years and. Try it again.
And honestly, the case with Giroux is that he's unsigned. So even if you trade him and he does want to come back, I mean, it could be that type of case too, where maybe they trade him, he goes off, and then maybe he comes back to Philly if they fix this mess in the offseason. But you have to. If you're not in the playoffs and you're going to lose the guy anyway, you don't have a choice. We also have other guys. Like, in my opinion, I think I'd hold on to Konechny unless I'm trading him for a similar type of age group. Right, like maybe a different position.
Yeah.
But I'm keeping Provorov, I'm keeping Sam, I'm keeping my 25 and under guys.
Yeah.
And
so
anybody
you got to believe in their development, right?
Yeah.
You can't just say, okay.
Well, you went through you went through the growing pains of it too.
Exactly, but just because a 24-year-old player has a bad season doesn't mean he's not going to bounce back. It's not a linear thing, right? There's tons of players that had bad seasons at age 23. 24 and turn out to be superstars afterwards, or not superstars, but really good players in the league anyway. So you can't just give up on a guy at that age, I don't think. And I mean, the Flyers have a lot they could recoup. You trade Giroux, you get a first rounder. I'm going to say almost 99%. You're probably going to get a first rounder and some other things back as well.
You better get a first round.
Otherwise, there's no reason.
Exactly. And then, I mean, you could even trade Ristolainen. He's a UFA too. He'll have some value at the deadline. You could trade a Justin Braun. They can get some picks back and even trade up in the draft and do a lot in this draft because it is very strong, right? You get 2 second-round picks. You turn that into a late first. There's a lot of maneuvering that they could potentially.
But just remember that the GMs are so egotistical and stubborn.
I know.
And waving that white flag, and I agree. But I think a lot of it, that's why I said this home stretch is critical. Because it's going to determine what the Flyers do at the deadline. It's going to determine, if Fletch is going to house, if he might fire scouts, he might, it's like I said, this was a surprising development. I did not see the Flyers by January being this kind of this stuck, almost in reverse. I thought that they would be in the picture with the Rangers.
Yep.
Because I knew the Rangers were going to be better. Obviously not as good as they are right now, but the goal he has is like 99% of the reason why. But I still felt that, and I talked about it. I said that the Flyers are lumped in together with the Rangers, and there was another team, and I think Montreal, because they were coming off of a cup season, that I said, I didn't know Carey Price was going to quit. That the three of them, those three teams would be battling for that 8th spot in the East, right? And right now it's Detroit. I mean, Detroit is the team that's the one team.
Yeah. And they've been rebuilding and doing it the right way. So it's not very surprising because they got a lot of great prospects. So
yeah.
Well, that's Yzerman for you. All right. Let's get into the final segment of here. Let's get back to Flyers prospects. We got a few we want to talk about. I'll open up with this, though. It's not a Flyers prospect thing, but then I do want to talk about the players we mentioned prior to filming. So recently, Bobby Clark came out with comments essentially saying that Ron Hextall is the reason the Flyers drafted Nolan Patrick. The scouts wanted Cale Makar. And that, again, I don't know why he would even come out and say this right now. I don't really think it's that appropriate to say that. He's not even our GM anymore. I don't know what it really matters. And most of Patrick's lack of success isn't necessarily that he was talentless, is because his injury history is ridiculous at this point. And, it's just good to see him play. He's played 9 games in the season. He's got a goal and 2 assists on the season, and he has 2 assists in the last 3 games, which is great. But I want to hear what you have to say about this, Steve. When you look at that draft, and I know you've said this before, so I just want you to repeat it really to people. What do you think about a statement like that says, hey, Flyers really screwed up by taking Nolan Patrick, and, everybody was against Hextall, and he did it anyway, and he's stupid, and he was ignorant about it. What do you think about that?
Well, Bobby Clark made a lot of dumb moves too, so
yes, he did.
Yeah, so it's not like and that's the one thing I've tried to learn as a draft guy, is that before I go bragging about my home runs, I should also mention my failures. And I too had, and we talked about this, just to show you how inexperienced I was at doing this. My rationale for not ranking Cale Makar high in the preseason ranking was because he was going to go to UMass and party too much there and might get in trouble. That was my rationale. It was completely stupid. It's a significant cognitive bias on my part to say, well, this guy's going to go to UMass and party like everybody else, so he won't be a star. It was dumb. And I did end up ranking him 4th overall. So I learned. But anyway, the point is that, if you're going to make a statement like that and throw a guy under the bus, you have to add a little bit of context to it. And the context is significant, is that Nolan Patrick, from really the second he was eligible for the draft, even before that, was viewed as the slam dunk home run consensus #1 pick to start the 2016-17 season. Yeah. He was a great player for Brandon. They won the Memorial Cup. He had a hand in it. He played with Provorov. Everyone watched him plenty. There was no reason to think that Nolan Patrick was not worthy of being a 1st overall pick, and that the only concern with him and his draft year, and it was a big concern, but still, was the injuries, right? I think it was a groin thing. It was concussions, but he still played well enough to make you think oh, I think he still got it. And what tilted the conversation towards Nico Hischier was, like we said, it was the World Junior Championship. Patrick did not play there. He didn't play for Team Canada. But because Switzerland is Switzerland, Hischier did, and he did well there. And then the top prospects game, where Hischier had, I think, 3 points. And I forgot if Patrick even played in that game, or if he did, he had 2 points. So he had a goal. And one guy had 3 points, the other guy had 1. So that solidifies.
He did. I'm pretty sure he did play in that game.
Yeah. So it wasn't and then Patrick, of course, he got hurt again. He had the issue. Was it the combine? He missed the combine.
Abdominal core tear, and he had 2 of them. They missed the first one.
The idea was that, hey, if this kid, he's a big center, he's that #1 franchise center that you talked about that the Flyers didn't have,
right?
And so maybe that was the rationale behind it, where they said, well, Cale Makar, but dude, we just drafted Ivan Provorov. Okay, he's our #1. He's our future star. We drafted Sanheim and Provorov 1st round, back-to-back drafts, right? Yeah. So You know what I'm saying?
Before that, Haig. Before that, you know.
Yeah,
what I mean?
and so they, and I think Moran was on the in the farm system, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So like we knew that the Flyers had a strength, or they were
D.
deep on defense. So yes, McCaw was the most explosive and dynamic, but again, like Elias Pettersson, is he a center? Is he a wing? He was like 150 pounds.
Right.
You know what I mean? So like, and I watched him play, and he was like I ranked him 7th. Cody Glass is another one like that had a really great year with Portland, but he like didn't have good showings at certain camps. So the pick was completely justified to make at the time. And when the Flyers won the lottery, I'm pretty sure a lot of Flyers fans said, "We got to get Nolan Patrick." Oh my God, Nolan Patrick, Patrick, draft Patrick. Like how many Flyers fans after he
draft McCarr? Yeah,
were screaming McCarr. I'm sure there's one or two out there, and that person, congratulations, you get a cookie.
Well, it's in hindsight, right? Like, look at drafting in hindsight. You could go back through the last 20 years and say, look at this team. They passed on this guy who turned out to be, this amazing player. In hindsight, if you look at that draft and the Flyers don't pick Nolan Patrick, first off, the fan base explodes because they're like, why aren't you picking the center? We need a center. Look at our defensive depth. It's so great. We need this guy based on what we've done in the past drafting and just the prospect pool in general, right? So that's the first thing. You could go back at any draft and say, hey, in hindsight, this guy was better, but you can't look at it that way. And he was consensus the whole year beforehand. And then you obviously went through the reasons why he slipped to number 2 due to Hischier's play in the World Juniors. And the thing is too, is that people don't factor in. And a shout out, to Bill Meltzer, who mentioned this on the Flyers Daily podcast, who covers the team as well. He was stating that, McCarr to that point didn't play in the OHL or in the CHL. He played only Junior A and then went to UMass afterwards. So that there's a level of risk there. I mean, obviously, like you were saying before, you can't look at a player playing at lower levels and not think, he might have the potential to be great, but that also really factors into things, I think. And I mean, everybody who was top 2 in that draft would have went either Hischier, Patrick, Hischier, and there's no doubts in my mind about that. So.
I mean, I think I had Casey Middlestat ranked 3rd in that draft.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I had Klim Kostin ahead of I had Suzuki like 28.
Nobody saw McCarr blowing up to this extent. Let's be real. And let's also talk about the fact that Kel McCarr plays with frickin' Nathan McKinnon and Gabriel Landeskog and Mikko Rantanen, and all those guys were top first overall pick, top 10 pick. Landeskog was a 2nd overall, a 3rd overall pick. So I mean, this was the way that Colorado was built. They were able to trade Matt Duchene, who they drafted 2nd overall or 3rd overall, right? So that's why Colorado is where they're at, and that's why McCaw is looking as great as part of the reason why McCaw is looking as great as he is. Look at the supporting cast he has. Ask the question: if Cale McCaw is on the Flyers right now, is he the same player? I think he is, but it doesn't necessarily mean
the output wouldn't
be that dynamic.
A playoff team, right? Because we've seen great offensive defensemen play on teams. Phil Housley, what's it called? Andrei Markov, guys that put up points. Steve Duchesne. I know I'm dating myself, but still, putting up points as a look at Quinn Hughes and the year that he had last year for Vancouver. Beautiful statistics, right?
They were bad though.
They stunk. So Bobby Clark, I don't get it. I don't know why he would do that. Maybe it's odd considering that
the conversation kind of led that way. Like, it was the Andy Strickland podcast that was kind of going down, led that. Like, he didn't bring it up out of nowhere or anything. It led through that. It's a Blues podcast. And then they started talking about Braden Shen, and he was traded in that draft for after Patrick was drafted.
That trade was brilliant, in my opinion. Even though
I love that
a very
trade.
Good player, but we got Frost.
Farabee and Frost out of it. I'd say that's a win for the Flyers.
Yeah, and Farabee, sorry. And I love what you said there about it, because I say this to people all the time, and people are really hard here on Provorov. But I think you put Provorov on a team that actually has their shit together, and you're not moving that guy.
No.
Like the way people talk about Heiskanen's that D is deep. The team plays much better. There's a problem with this team. This is what I'm very concerned about with people wanting to just move guys out. It's we need to fix what's wrong with this team, because even if you put Cale McCarr on this team, he's not going on a 40-goal pace. It's not happening because the supporting cast isn't going to play well around him. And that's the stuff that concerns me, where I hear all that stuff, but it's like, we need to play well as a team. To pick on each individual guy and be like, oh, that guy, it's like, until you play well as a team, like I point out the Rangers to people, and I did it on the podcast the other day, and everybody's like, oh, blow it up like the Rangers did. And I'm like, okay, let's go look at Lafreniere and Kakko's numbers. And they're completely pedestrian. Like, they're not terrible, but they weren't like lighting the world on fire. They're not doing it because of youth. They're doing it as a team. Adam Fox is the exception. Structure. But they're playing well as a team. Like you said, their goaltenders playing out of his mind, which is great, but they're also playing well around him. They're giving the ability to succeed. Hart was playing out of his mind to start the year, and the team just wasn't there. So it's like, I don't know. In my mind, I'm like, you got to fix systematically what's wrong with this team. Like, that's what Lou Lamoriello did with Barry Trotz. Like, they're on paper, they're not the most talented team, but they played very well as a team. They got the most out of the players they had.
Yeah.
And I want to see that first before I go out and trade.
Yeah, they have a structure in place just back to the Islanders, and I think that's really what's lacking with the Flyers and kind of explains things. Is just, if you look at the way they're playing fundamentally, they're just not supporting each other on the ice. And where does that come from? I mean, I don't know if it's a coaching issue, but the structure is just not there, and they have the players and the talent where, I mean, if it was, they should be playing a lot better than they are currently. And I'm interested because, I mean, you have Fletcher who, I mean, his moves weren't bad this offseason, but we don't really know what direction he's going to go in. So I wonder if he's left to hire the head coach, if that's going to be another misfire. So
I don't know. It's a good question. All right, let's get into the wrap up here. Let's talk about these players. This is why we have you on, Steve. So let's start quickly. We'll talk about Cam York. We talked about him a bunch already, but Cam York is up in the NHL. You watched him play a lot. You're aware of his skill set. He played 24 minutes last night for the Sharks. Flyers were holding him back in the minors, but when he was coming up and the Flyers essentially didn't have any of their top defensemen, they're using him like a number one defenseman immediately. I'm personally not surprised. He clearly is capable of playing a top four role in the NHL. I think they probably want to slow him down even a little bit now just because he's so young. But what do you think about Cam York? And then we'll go through the three guys that are not in the NHL.
Yeah, he's the silver lining to the season so far. And I think that just like what you said, we should all definitely, though, temper our expectations because we went down this path with Provorov and with Konechny and all them, so that it's great when these guys produce and they can step up and assume a very difficult role at such a young age. But at the same time, we're talking about the Philadelphia market here. We're talking about a losing team. So what's going to be the real telling sign is going to be what guys like York and Farabee and them do when the Flyers are good and playing for playoff points or playing for the division title or playing for the, like a game 6 or game 7. But, Cam York has been given a top role everywhere he's been. Okay. And we remember, we discussed this, I think, like 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, where that NCDP power play could have easily had 5 forwards, right? It was Zegras, Hughes, Cole Caulfield, Matt Boldy, or what's his name? I forgot the other guy. And then York was the quarterback. But how do you quarterback a power play? It's like quarterback a power play with Mario Lemieux and Wayne Gretzky and Eric Lindros. Like you just kind of give them the puck. And when I watched York do that, I'm like, wow, this kid is a really unselfish, smart kid. He knows exactly how to tap into his teammates' strengths. He's a great team-first guy. He's selfless, and he's mature. He's smart. He did the same thing for Team USA at the World Juniors. He did the same thing for Michigan. He did the same thing for Lehigh Valley in his brief time there. So sky's the limit. You have to be happy, but you just we got to be careful that we don't pin all our hopes and dreams in the future of the franchise on him, because he's still only 20 years old, 21, soon to be 21. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, he solves a problem where you say, all right, the power play's been terrible, right? And we thought the power play was going to be good because they brought in Keith Yandel, and it's like Cam York's the power play is kind of better with Cam York than it is with with Keith Yandel. At least that's what the few games that I watched.
No, it's
Not
true.
kind of a lot
It's
better.
true.
Okay, and remember, like, Yandel is a one-dimensional, the Marc-Andre Bergeron of the 2010s and 20s. He is a one-dimensional defenseman. He is a offensive or offenseman, whatever you want to call it, one-track mind, offense, points, shoot. Whereas York is not like that. Okay, you could put him out there in the penalty kill. He's physical. He's hit people hard. He's got good size, good balance, calm with the puck. He'll take a hit. And Keith Yandel does not like taking a hit. So, turnovers and so on the end of the result. So it seems like the defenseman that the Flyers had in their system that they drafted between let's say 2015 and 2000, let's say 19 or 20, they all fit that mold, right? Like they're reliable two-way types. Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem like they drafted any real pure offensive types, right? Provorov is a two-way type. And York got somehow categorized as an offensive defenseman just because he put up a lot of points. But anyone who watched the NTDP that year saw that this kid could play defense. He's good. And so I think, is he deserving of a longer look? Absolutely. I say keep him there. What we have to keep an eye on is when everybody, let's say, comes back and they're healthy, what's the decision going to be? I say keep him. He deserves it. And tell him, which veteran, whose ever job he takes, say, hey, thanks for playing, but see you next year, or, happy trails, I
mean, we're all talking about Keith Yandel just hitting his record of consecutive games, and there's a good chance he probably will get benched after that. He has not looked good. He looked decent in the beginning of the year. He had some good games, but now he's just really bad. But if I look at that left side and I look at the future there, you have Provorov is 24, you have Sanheim is 25, and then you have York who's 20. It's like that's enough youth and that's enough stuff to build off of. And like those are three guys that I hold on to. I like Ristolainen, but I'm open to the idea of trading him too at the trade deadline, especially if he gets us a first round pick. I think if this defense is going to be improved this year, definitely for the future, he's part of it. If he's playing 24 minutes a night,
I think they're going to temper, that back. Like once
I think so too.
You have him on a third pair,
especially if they're bad.
Yeah, you get him playing about 15 minutes. You're not having him up against those top pairings. He gets the power play time in to build the confidence. Just with York, that's easy to see is his poise and just the calmness, right? Like you put him into a situation where he's playing 24 minutes a night against top players, and he just fits in and slides in perfectly and doesn't look out of place. And that's a great thing. The maturity level's there. His first pass out of the zone is great. Like you don't often see him, miss on that. And I think that's something the Flyers can use just because their transition game hasn't been the best as of late.
So, all right, let's get past York because we got more to see on him, and it'll be exciting to see how he develops the rest of the year. I thought they would give him 15 minutes on Vasili, but when you see players playing 24 minutes, those coaches are going to be pretty tempted to play him more, especially if he excels. But let's get into the final three players, and then we'll close off on this. We didn't get really a World Junior Championships. Two of these players were in it. Elliot De Noier, Emile Andre, obviously representing their respective countries, Canada and Sweden. And then we do want to talk about Conor Mclennan, a guy who, by the numbers, is just putting up a ridiculous set of numbers. And it's been kind of under the radar. Like I never hear Flyers fans talking about him. I guess because he's undersized and maybe because of the players he's playing with in Winnipeg. But his numbers have just been ridiculous. And like, I'll just go through it real quick and then I want to hear your opinion on them. So Conor Mclennan this year in 33 games, got 25 goals, 23 assists, 48 points. He's a plus 30. That's really damn good for a goal scorer in his second year not second year in WHL, third year with the Winnipeg Ice, and obviously just shellacking his previous record with the team. So let's go through Conor McClennan first, and then maybe De Noier, and then Andre. I'm gonna go through that.
Well, McClennan, we said this before. He was a guy I had in my early preseason first round. In 2020, I dropped him, I think maybe to like the third or fourth round. He ended up going to was it the seventh?
Yeah. Sixth round.
I mean, fiery competitor. And the thing about, Winnipeg is a steamroller. Okay. They destroy everybody. They put up a lot of points, there's no break. All right. They roll four lines. They have offensive minded defensemen. They have elite scoring forwards, right? In Matt Savoy and Connor Geeky. They're both going to be top 10 picks this year in the draft, more than likely. With Mclennan, he's a power play specialist, though. He's got the one-time shot. He's got the hands. He goes in front of the net. He'll do all the dirty work. So it could be a situation where now he's old enough to be in the AHL. I don't know. I know he had a bad injury a couple of years ago. I think it was a broken collarbone. But he was healthy last year. He did fine. And he's showing what you want to see out of these junior kids in Canada, the CHL kids. Progression every year. And he's on this crazy pace now. He's going to score 45, maybe 50 goals if it's a full season. So, again, power play specialist. Guy you set up in the circle for the one-timer. We'll put him at the side of the net or in front, for deflections. I think we got to get past the size. And it's not like this kid is like some like finesse perimeter player. Like that's not, no, he's a dirty, get his nose dirty, muck or grind the type if he had to be. He's the kind of guy I could see show up, be on the fourth line. You give him 6 to 8 minutes a game and he will get the crowd going. He hits. So really 7th round pick right now. It's looking great for the Flyers. Got to be happy with him. Yeah,
no. And obviously he's second on the team in points. He is one of the older ones of that scoring group. But again, given his size, just seems like a guy who'll probably play like top line for the Phantoms or something like that next year.
Well, at least top power play. Yeah.
Top power play. Yeah, most likely. All right, let's get to the next one. That's Elliot De Noier. He's having his own fantastic season, named captain of his team. I think he is potentially going to get traded, but right now that rumor's out there. But in 23 games, he has 16 goals, 20 assists. He's a plus 13. He did play here in preseason. He looked excellent, and he seems to be another steal of a draft pick. Being a 5th round pick, just he's been progressively getting better every year.
Yeah, a smaller guy, but with Halifax on that line, he was great last year. Last year, he was the top line center on a bad team where he had the kid LaRue on one wing and Orr on the other. And so they were really all that Halifax really had up front. And what I liked about him was at the World Juniors. He wasn't given a huge role. I think he was a bottom 6 center, but every time I watched him, he stood out. He stood out on defense. He was checking. He was just tenacious. So in a way, it's like a poor man's Peltier, the kid that got drafted in the 1st round for Calgary, but he's a wing, not a center. But a similar style, like a dog in the bone kind of thing, although Peltier is a little bit more demonstrative. But, Peltier this year leads, I think, all AHL rookies in scoring in his first full year in the league. So De Noier is a guy that I think is going to step right up into Lehigh Valley and make a difference. And, when you get these smaller guys that have obvious skill, they're not the best skaters, or De Noier is not a bad skater, but I think it's always like, well, you're small, the odds are against you. And we're seeing more and more guys every year come out and kind of buck that trend. So, for him, he plays a complete 200-foot game. Reliable guy. You want him out there for the late face-offs. He'll kill penalties. And, just an outstanding stick handler, too. I mean, he's got the puck on his stick in the corners. Very tough to knock off the puck. So he won't be that dynamic franchise-type center that the Flyers need. But, again, it always goes back to what we talked about before about the competition in camp. And now that he already has one good camp under his belt, then they know that, all right, when this kid shows up, I'm going to have to step my game up because I know De Noier is going to come in. He's a hard worker. He's going to set the right example, and it could have a trickle-down effect and make everybody else play better. Yeah, it seems like a future 3rd-line center for the Flyers, like penalty-killing guy, could score shorthanded and whatnot. Almost like a Scott Lawton type-ish. Yep. I don't know about that mold exactly, maybe more skilled. But... I mean, very, very similar. I mean, just overall, like Lawton's not a big dude. He's bigger than De Noier, but Lawton was always like that poor man's Mike Richard version. Yeah. And I like Lawton a lot. Steve, I know you're a big Lawton fan. Yeah. As well. All right. Well, let's get into our last guy, and that is Emile Andre. He was a former 2nd round pick, another forgotten prospect. It feels like people, and this is just coming from our end, Steve, like
people aren't very aware of Flyers prospects anymore. Now that we're like kind of past that era, like nobody cares. Nobody brings up Bobby Brink anymore. Nobody brings up Emil Andre. They're like, we're an old team. We're going nowhere. And it's like,
we stink. Who cares about the prospects?
Yeah. It's like, no, we still have a ton of young talent in this organization.
A ton.
We haven't even seen all of it.
Can't give up on that.
Nate Wisdom. I mean, Forster. I mean, these are talented kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Emil Andre, some people kind of, they saw in the World Juniors, I didn't get to watch it myself, but from what I understand, there was only 2 games. I missed both of them that he was in, but great. A goal and an assist. Yeah. And I heard he was looking really good. I know you're a fan of him. I know you talked about how he plays above his weight class. But a guy at 5'8", 180 is actually really thick for a 19-year-old as well. What do you think about Emil Andre? How do you think he's progressing? Where do you see like his trajectory? Do you think the Flyers might want to bring him over here, maybe even next year to play for the Phantoms?
Well, I guess it's I don't know if it's kind of like I can see both sides playing devil's advocate about his development because yes, he does play for HV71, but they play in the lesser league. They got relegated. So he's playing against lesser competition, but he is basically their number 1 and number 2 guy. So, you want that kid playing, whether he's playing in junior hockey or in adults. If they're playing in the adult league, you don't want them playing only 10 minutes a game. At the World Juniors, listen, Sweden had a fantastic defense core, right? They had Grands, they had Andre, they had Edvinsson. They had Leo Lufa. I like the Blues prospect. So, and it was physical. That was the one thing I noticed. So we knew about Andre being a physical guy, but collectively as a group, it was the most physical I've ever seen the Swedes play. And they were giving people a hard time, even though it was only 2 games. So, it's a shame that we didn't get a chance to see that group unfold. We didn't get a chance to see, it was Sweden, USA, and Russia, which was, I think, the tougher group. But the thing is, he's 5'8", he's 5'8", he's a 5'8" defenseman. And how does that hurt NHL defenseman? You're a 5'8" defender defending against a 6'2" wing. Like, how do you defend Nate McKinnon? If you're 5'8", how do you defend against, Austin Matthews? These guys are puck handling magicians. So I think that's where the physicality might come into play. But again, if Sam Girard could do it for Colorado, and eat minutes for a really good cup contending team. And of course, he's had his ups and downs as well. But Andre is going to have to come over. Enough with Sweden. He's been there long enough. He's played against men, I think, now for 3 years. So you come over now. You get used to the whole North American style. You get used to the physicality. You have to get acclimated to the strength of the AHL, the division. That's a strong division in the AHL. And ultimately the NHL squad. But with him, he could also run a power play because he's got offensive abilities as well. He's got a great shot. So maybe a good comparison to him would be Eric Brandstrom more so than Girard. And Brandstrom, remember, Brandstrom was the centerpiece of the Mark Stone deal because he was so great in the AHL. And then Ottawa's coach was like, I got no use for him. And it's kind of been a little bit of a sad story. They're not sad, like heartbreaking, but you want to see Brandstrom develop and give a nice time. But long term, I'd say Andre's going to be a long term guy, especially when you have if you're going to give the reins of the power play to, let's say, a guy like Cam York. That a good second option would be to have a guy like Andre, but still a long ways to go. We got to figure out how he's going to handle the AHL first.
As you're talking, this is something I don't know if I'd be pro, but I look at the draft this year. I wonder if there's any opportunity to even trade a guy like Andre. Not that I hate giving up on young guys, but if you really want to get assets, like this is a guy that you could get a 2nd round pick probably back for, because he's like more developed. I don't know about this draft because of how strong it is, but I do look at opportunities like that, moving guys who guys who are already like kind of further along in development. You can enter into your system earlier. Where
and then,
they have flexibility with him because he's European. Yeah. So from a depth standpoint and contractual standpoint, when the Flyers always like drafting these Swedish kids and college kids because they're crowded and they know that they have only so many contracts to give out. So with a guy like Andre, you could keep him in Europe for look at there's a guy. He's one example. Jesper Sellgren. he was a kid that the Carolina picked a while ago. That he's been in Sweden. He's been playing for Frölunda. I think he was playing for Luleå as well. Actually, I don't know if he played for Frölunda, but he was definitely playing for Luleå as eating minutes for like 3-4 years. When's he coming up? When's he coming over? And now he's in the AHL. He's doing pretty well for their affiliate there. So, it could be, like I said, a 3 to 5 year process with him. But I think before we need to see Andre produce in the AHL before we could say really know how much he's worth. Because we all know that these guys could score in Europe the live long day, junior, Allsvenskan, extra liga, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's really when they come to the AHL, that's going to be the measuring stick. And that's why Brandstrom got essentially traded for Mark Stone. It's because he was the top scoring defenseman, one of the top scoring defensemen for Vegas's affiliate in Chicago back then. So, listen, the physicality aspect is going to play into how good of a shot he has at making the NHL because he's got the skill. His speed's fine. It's not a deterrent or a problem. So, but I like him. He was a first round prospect for me. I ranked him in my top 20.
I remember you told me that and I've seen a little bit of him, but like he's really good on his edges. Like he's not fast, but he's very dynamic, hard to get
up. Exactly.
Yeah.
When I watched a couple of games that were in the World Juniors, obviously only 2 games, his skating work is like impeccable. He's a really good skater, really smooth. You could tell it's like flawless with the stride. So that's definitely a strength. That and the power play contributions for sure.
Yeah. All right. We are at 2 hours. Just about. This was an awesome episode. I love this episode. Vasili, is there anything you want to ask Steve before we
No, I think we got it all out. We got all the questions in for him.
Yeah.
He did an awesome job with all breaking down all the draft prospects and just all the potential great players coming up this year and even a little bit into 2023 too.
Yeah, that was awesome. Steve, obviously you have your own work. You are a busy man. Can you let the people know what they should look out for? And obviously I'm going to ask you back on pretty soon, but
sure.
What are you working on? What should people be aware of? Podcasts, everything?
Well, podcasts have kind of like taken a back seat because I'm spending this year. I'm changing it up. Usually I watched like 1 or 2 games per kid before I could really like rank them and then mock them and then write a little bit of a summary about them to prep for my draft report that I do at the end of the year. This year, I'm taking it slow. All right. We had cancellations galore, right? Those international tournaments that got canceled, not just the World Juniors, but the U18 Five Nations in December got canceled. The U18 Five Nations in February got canceled. The U24 Nations in February got canceled. U19 Five Nations got canceled. And so all these events getting canceled, in a way, it frees up work for me. And that allows me to focus on the league play, which to me is the better measuring stick, is how they play in league play. And so I'm going one by one. I use Instat Hockey. It's great. If you guys don't know about it, it basically it's heaven. It saves me, instead of having to buy 15 different streams, that you pay one flat rate for them. It's a lot, but you pay one flat rate and they give you streams to everybody. And so I've been using them, and you could cut clips, you could go forwards, backwards. It has skill breakdowns. And so I'm like a kid in a candy store with this thing. And so I'm usually watching now about, I would say, no less than 10 games per prospect. So I'm banging out a prospect profile every week. They're free. It's on the blog, draftanalyst.com. I just dropped Simon Nemec today. He's ranked number 10. Next one coming next week is Conor Geeky, Conor McClennan's teammate, sometimes line mate. So it's going to be one after the other. I'll sneak in a mock draft or 2, but rankings are going to be later on in the year. And that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Looking forward to that. And again, the Draft Analyst, guys, make sure to follow him on Twitter. Make sure to check out his website. It's just thedraftanalyst.com, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Vasili, anything you want to tell people that you're working on?
Yeah, so I should have an article coming up Friday on flyersnittygree.com, and you guys can follow me on Twitter at flyeredup.
Yep, absolutely. Guys, like, subscribe, share, leave us comments. Pester Steve on Twitter. He definitely, I love your tweets, honestly. I look out for them all the time. So make sure you guys follow him, because you're not going to get obviously just Flyer stuff. You're going to get stuff from all over the league. And he definitely does a great job of focusing on young guys. And if you're a Flyers fan, It's time to start doing that. Even if the Flyers, rebound, there's work to be done with this organization. So be aware of what's to come. Steve, thank you so much. I did not expect for us to go 2 hours, but this was such a fun episode. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Likewise.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on.
Great.
Yeah. Obviously, Vasili, thank you as always. Thank you everybody for listening. Please like, subscribe, share. That's a humongous help. Do whatever you can, and we really appreciate all the support. The site is still growing. I don't know how it's still growing, but it still is. So thank you, everybody, and remember, stay gritty.